Okay, countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Dear viewers and listeners, good afternoon. Welcome to IARJ South Asia Dialogue. This is first of its series in 2023, and we will discuss religious extremism in South Asia in this dialogue. And we have wonderful set of panelists here, and they are from India. And another friend from India will represent Bangladesh, and from Pakistan and Sri Lanka. So, and also viewers, let me share that this dialogue is being live telecasted on IARJ Facebook page. So please join there for the outsiders to listen or to view this dialogue. And it will be live telecasted there, and it will be, and the recording will be available after that as well. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Waqar Gilani. I am a journalist based in Islamabad, Pakistan, and I have been covering human rights issue for several years. And I am one of the founding members of the wonderful team of IARJ. And let me introduce to these other worthy panelists. Like next to me is Priya Sen. Priya Darshan is from New Delhi, and she is a freelance journalist, and she has been a participant of the IARJ dialogues in the previous times as well. And then we have Mr. Uday Basu. He is chairperson of the IARJ board these days. And this wonderful person is a freelance columnist as well from Kolkata. And he will be talking about Bangladesh this time. And then we have Mubashir Bukhari. He is from Pakistan and he's based in Lahore, very senior journalist and good friend. And he has been covering security and religious extremism and persecution issues for the past several years. And then we have very nice friend from Sri Lanka, Colombo, and this Indivari Amuwat. And Indi is representing, she's a producer and she's a broadcast journalist there. So let me begin with this topic that South Asia viewers and participants, you know that it is one of the most significant region of the world where we have more than 2 billion population, and religious extremism is a serious issue for the past several decades if we see in this region, particularly when we talk about India and Pakistan. And then we have a similar issue we see in Sri Lanka where Buddhist and Muslim communities, they have been victim of this religious persecution and extremism. And then we see in Bangladesh, there's a different situation where we see the rise of religious extremism in a different way. So my first question to the panelists, I think I will start from Mr. Uday. I think Priya, maybe if you can, because from India and New Delhi, if we can start, then can you please let us know a brief situation of religious extremism in your country and how it is growing and what are some of the key players in it and what are the methods they use to actually implement or practice this religious extremism, and what kind of support they have from the community or from different stakeholders. Priya.
Bakar, I think, I'll kind of jump in after Uday, kind of gives a more broader outline of what's going on. So I can then, get into some specific areas of, concern in India. And maybe we can just have a more intensive kind of discussion of that.
Sure. So can you a little bit say that how the religious extremism is growing in the country? Because these days we say India and Pakistan are quite in the news as well for different reasons. So if you can a little bit explain that.
Yeah, sure. So, I could start in any way. So, even though, in India, anti-Muslim hate has been rising substantially, the recent calls to violence are actually shocking in their excess. And I'll jump right in about the most recent cases of religious extremism in India. And I'll talk about the Hindu festival of Ram Navami, which this year coincided with the month of Ramadan. And Ram Navami was absolutely marred by violence when Hindu processions marched through Muslim neighborhoods, brandishing weapons, shouting anti-Muslim slogans, and indulging in stone pelting, bloodletting, arson. And this is just the tip of a broader trend in India, where there has been an alarming rise in the support of extremist Hindu nationalist groups since Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister 9 years ago. I talked about the Ram Navami, extremism, the extremism that the Ram Navami festival attracted, just to give a sense of what's happening currently in India. And I could, go deeper into that if you wish. Would you like me to do that?
Sure, sure.
Okay, sure. So what,
Yeah.
so Hindu festivals, taking off from Ram Navami, Hindu festivals are now increasingly used by the ruling Hindu majoritarian BJP party to mobilize voters and to polarize communities. So these festivals are orchestrated to terrorize Muslims, damage their properties and shrines, and generally unleash deadly lynch mobs. And these mobs often receive the political backing that affords them impunity. And the ruling government has adopted discriminatory laws and policies targeting religious minorities. And Hindu nationalist leaders make frequent anti-minority remarks, including calls to violence or even ethnic cleansing. So then we have, social media influencers. I'll just give you an example. So in March this year, there is a prosperous businesswoman called Kajal Hindustani. She's a mother of two, and she delivered a fiery speech at a rally organized by the Hindu extremist groups in the state of Gujarat, targeting the Muslim community. And in following that rally, Hindus and Muslims clashed, and 2 people were injured. 3 days later, the police filed a first information report against Kajal, and she was arrested a week later. 4 days after Kajal's arrest, she was let off on bail, and supporters welcomed her with flowers and sweets.
Wow.
So from an obscure internet Islamophobe in 2016, Kajal has gone on to spearhead rallies that abuse minorities and incite Hindus to violence against them. 2018, mind you, the Prime Minister started following her on Twitter. So social media platforms have little, really.
As you mentioned, Priya, that it is like an understanding which we see from your talk that maybe the government or the ruling political regime, that is backing actually this. Do you think that religious extremism has risen in the past several years due to a particular regime in India?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to kind of get at, Vakar, that I just wanted to give a backgrounder on what's going on, the most current incidents, because on the ground, Hindu nationalist leaders have been calling on followers. The political regime, in tandem with many of these leaders, they've been calling on followers to take up arms against minorities, particularly Muslims.
But do you think why they are becoming popular? Unfortunately, we can say.
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Why they are becoming popular? I mean, why people are buying this, side of extremism rather than being a moderate and peaceful and tolerant citizen?
Yeah, because there is this, the current regime under the Prime Minister is all about, it is about polarizing voters, winning elections, creating divisions among communities, and to really kind of cause, incite the mob. And in that sense, to really break up communities and break up support and at the grassroots level, so that communities split up, and then they are called to really, become, they are brainwashed, and they're called to participate in these violent acts. And then minorities are typically targeted, which creates more division. So it's like a vicious circle. One violent act spirals into another, and then to another, and then to another. It's like a vicious cycle.
Thank you very much, Priya. Now I will get to Mubashir Bukhari. So kindly, sir, if you can explain how is the situation of religious extremism in Pakistan, and what are some of the key groups and how they are getting support, and what is the environment right now?
Yeah, Vakar, thank you very much for inviting me to this prestigious platform. So, in my opinion, and my opinion is based on my observation, I think that extremism, I'm not talking of religious specifically right now. Extremism is somewhere built in our nation. That is the reason we see when partition took place, 40% population of Lahore was based on non-Muslim communities. Now we see a few thousands here. And likewise, 40% population of Amritsar was Muslim population. So how many do you see today? Priya might tell better than me. So this extremism was directed under various agendas. Like we have a problem in our neighborhood, which is called Afghanistan. So in '79, when we took part in the proxy war of the USA against USSR, so this extremism was used in the name of religion. During those days, I was a little kid when we we heard the word of jihad first time with a complete explanation or elucidation, and then we saw a huge network of religious seminaries being laid down across Pakistan, especially in those areas which were poverty stricken, and we saw then. Extremist element joining media industry. In my professional life, I saw a secular media converting into an extremist media. Uh, in the following years, when Taliban started ruling Afghanistan, this thing went to another extreme in Pakistan. Then various groups belonging to different sects were supported by Taliban. Till date, most of them are supported by Taliban, or Taliban are getting man force from those groups based in Pakistan. And we found, or we find, uh, a huge number of their tacit support within the settled areas of Pakistan. And then there are some laws like blasphemy law, which is largely misused. Uh, and that is the problem at present with Pakistan, because it is being used as a weapon. And for the information of viewers, I can tell you that according to a study conducted by Human Rights Commission of Pakistan and several other rights groups, 65% of blasphemy cases are based on personal vendettas. There is no blasphemy involved. And out of those false cases, 90% are registered against Muslims, if I'm citing the research correctly. And the recent study, which is a matter of concern for every Pakistani and every human right defender and the government and the state as well, is that this thing is being applied against foreigners now. Like we have an example of Priyantha Kumar, a Sri Lankan manager in Sialkot. He was lynched and he was burnt. And you know what happened was, since he was not familiar with Urdu transcript or Arabic writing, so he told his one of his employee that, okay, there are plenty of stickers inside the factory, remove them. And he didn't know what was written on those stickers or posters. So when they refused, he removed one of the stickers over which he was accused of committing serious blasphemy. And what happened, you know. And today, when we are discussing this, a blasphemy case has been registered against a Chinese national who was working on a dam in KP area of Kohistan area of KP. And the mob pressure forced the district administration to arrange a helicopter to take the accused from Kohistan to somewhere else for his protection, though a case has been registered against him. So this thing is alarming for Pakistan and the state of Pakistan. Uh, every day, there are dozens of blasphemy cases registered across Pakistan, of which a couple of them are reported. Otherwise, what media response towards these kind of incident is media is afraid of reporting these incidents in letter and spirit. And I can cite my personal example. There were attacks on Ahmadis worship places in Lahore back in 2008-9, and I reported for an international wire service, and our editors based in Singapore and London used the word terrorist attack worship place of a minority Muslim sect. Next day, I received a call from Afghanistan's number, and the guy claimed to be an activist of a banned outfit. He told me that you use the word minority Muslim sect, whereas the state of Pakistan has declared them non-Muslim. So you are on our hit list now. So after that, I had to arrange for my own security.
Yeah, Mubashir, I will come back to this role of media as well and challenges which are being faced by media while covering such issues later on. But what I get from you and Priya is basically the use of religion in politics. Actually, that has damaged the fabric of society and actually added to religious extremism.
I wanted to add one thing more, that the unfortunate, the Pakistan's situation is currently very unfortunate because we were already facing the menace of religious extremism. These days, the religious extremism is mixed with political extremism. And I feel that the same thing is happening in India. So now both religious and political extremisms are mixing up, and they are posing more threats to the society, for which we need to basically revisit our state's policy.
Okay, thank you very much, Mubashir. And Mr. Uday Basu, do you think that we are facing a similar situation in Bangladesh, or it's a bit different? Uday. I think Uday need to unmute himself. Maybe I can come to Indivari. Amwat, can you please share us some of your experiences and the background of religious extremism situation right now in Colombo and Sri Lanka?
Thank you, Waqar, and thank you very much to the IARJ team, especially for taking this conversation forward to creating dialogue surrounding these topics. In Sri Lanka's context, it's very important that we talk about extremism, especially religious extremism, because something I speak about every time you invite me for conversations is the Easter Sunday massacre of 2019, where Sri Lanka was taken by shock. Yeah. Yes, Sri Lanka was taken by shock when an ISIS-inspired ring of attacks were carried out in an organized manner, but targeting Easter worshippers and non-suspecting tourists who were dining at luxury 5-star or 7-star hotels in Colombo and in other parts of Sri Lanka. This massacre claimed 250 lives, which also included foreigners, some of the biggest businessmen who were visiting Sri Lanka at the time, as well as many, as I said, Easter worshippers and those at hotels, staff, etc. Among them were religious extremist groups. So I'd like to also bring this conversation to how extremism and exclusivism began in Sri Lanka, because we were not open to ISIS or the spread of ISIS being in Sri Lanka. That was very unheard of. Nobody spoke about it. Everyone was taken by surprise when these explosions took place close to 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning when everyone was half asleep. And it was 10 years after a 3-decade-old war that concluded in Sri Lanka. And mind you, this war was between two ethnic groups, a terrorist group, communal disharmony, yes, but religious extremism was not something we discussed about. So that takes us to terrorism, which is, again, a byproduct of extremist ideologies. And these extremist ideologies means they are a byproduct of exclusivity. Exclusivity by the sense, in Sri Lanka, we had the Muslim community that was coexisting with majority Buddhists, the Hindus, Christian population, within a Sri Lankan identity. And the local and traditional Islam is called Sufism. Waka, all of you are well aware and more read about all this, but this beautiful religion coexisted with Buddhists, Hindus, and Christians. However, people started, after the 2019 Easter attacks, there was a massive narrative that this was an Islamic State attack, especially because an organization by the name of National Tawhid Jamaat claimed responsibility for the attack. And I spoke about Sufism. So later there came into two streams of Islam. This is termed by researchers and those who speak about what happened after interviews and interrogations, that the spread of exclusivism and extremism that I spoke about, the ladder effect, terrorism, byproduct of exclusive ideologies and extremist ideologies, and then extremism, a byproduct of exclusivism. And this inclusive society became exclusive to certain extremist groups when two streams of influence, one known as the Jamaati Islami, this group was identified and admitted to breaking down statues of Mother Teresa, Mother Mary, Lord Ganesh, deity Kataragama, as well as the Buddha statues in districts closer to the central parts of Sri Lanka. And they joined the Islamic State or ISIS. So this is an exclusivist group that was identified and they were banned. The other extremist group is the Wahhabi organization. They're called the Salafi Wahhabi group, and they came from Saudi Arabia, and they have been operating all the Tawhid groups in Sri Lanka. So we have a number of groups, the Sri Lanka Tawhid group, the National Tawhid group, the All Ceylon Tawhid group, and the National Tawhid Jamaat, which is the group represented by Zaharan Hashim, the ringleader of the Easter Sunday attacks. He who claimed responsibility for the attacks. There is a video, this I can share the link with you later on, of an interview I conducted with Professor Rohan Gunaratne, somebody who has written several books after investigations and interrogations and interviews with extremists, terrorists, and those who have opened up to him. So this extremist, Zaharan Hashim, who carried out these attacks and who was, in fact, who suicided himself as part of this, the planned attacks that he carried out. He represented the National Tawhid Jamaat, and most of these organizations are banned in Sri Lanka. This is often admitted. Sorry, yes, Waka.
I think this is very important background which you are sharing with us and informative as well. But could you please tell us a little bit about the situation in recent years? In the past few years, how is religious extremism growing? How it is affecting social fabric? I mean, it is adding to the intolerance. There are moves for some peace and harmony as well.
Waka, in the last year or so, Sri Lanka has been grappling with an unprecedented economic crisis, right? Here there have been queues of fuel queues, food shortage, and we have been seeing massive inequality in terms of welfare distribution among the most vulnerable, and a political crisis with economic crisis emerged. So this is where we saw that there were no boundaries in terms of communal disharmony or religious differences and lines being drawn between these groups, especially where there is hunger. You forget about all issues. But having said that, there is an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. We have spoken about this, the fact that Facebook, online, Twitter, social media, so to say, there still is space and needs attention by authorities where we promote moderation, because as soon as this economic situation settles, we are going to go back to the issues that were not settled, because we are currently talking about an anti-terrorism bill, which you may have heard on the news. Everyone's talking about how this discriminates against certain parties who can be deemed terrorists without any legal case. So these aspects could really surface once Sri Lanka's political and economic crisis settles. But at the same time, social media is still adding fuel to the fire, and that needs to be contained.
I think sometimes we also fear that when there is political and economic crisis, then actually exploitation of religion actually is more fearful, and it can rise as well. But let's go back to Mr. Uday Basu and talk about Bangladesh and how is the situation of religious extremism there, and what is background of that, and what is the situation in recent years. Mr. Uday.
Vakar, just to kind of, I'm stepping in before Uday steps in.
Please.
Just very briefly after Uday finishes, I'd also like to talk briefly about the targeting of other minority groups in India. And
okay, sure.
That and how that has escalated in the recent years as well.
So I will frame it in the second question as well, so that you can explain it. Yeah, Mr. Uday, I think he needs to unmute himself. Mr. Uday.
Yes. Am I audible now?
Sir, please. We are waiting for you.
Yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah. See, the religious extremist groups operating in Bangladesh are Jamaat-e-Islami, Jamaat-ul-Mujahideen Bangladesh, Hifazat-e-Islam, and Ansarul-Islam. The Jamaat-ul-Mujahideen Bangladesh reportedly supports Islamic State. Now, their goals are to unleash attacks and violence on minority groups such as Hindu, Buddhist, Shiite, and Ahmadiyyas. In addition, they resort to killing advocates of liberal ideas. This is, I think, typically of Bangladesh. They are known as bloggers and also celebrated authors. Over 400 bloggers are on their radar. Some of them have been killed and some others have fled the country. One such author was a Dhaka University professor, Humayun Azad, who died under mysterious circumstances within weeks of landing in Germany in connection with his research work. It is suspected that he paid the price for his liberal ideas. Now, to understand religious extremism in Bangladesh, one needs to have a look at the country's geographical position and political history. Bangladesh has been created by carving out the eastern territory of Pakistan. Pakistan itself was formed by partitioning India on its western and eastern flanks. The huge landmass of India stood between the two parts of Pakistan at the time of the formation of Pakistan during transfer of power by the British in 1947. The aspirations of the people of what was then called East Pakistan to assert their linguistic freedom and form an elected government after winning majority, were thwarted by the rulers of West Pakistan. A civil war broke out, and Bangladesh was formed with support, both military and material, from India. Indian soldiers camouflaged themselves as freedom fighters and defeated the Pakistan army fighting with the people of East Pakistan. Now, this origin is in a way at the root of the growth of religious extremism in Bangladesh. For religious fanatics in Bangladesh identify themselves with Pakistan and oppose secular ideals and India's support to the government of the current ruler, Sheikh Hasina. The religious fundamentalists and extremists operating on the soil of Bangladesh want the state to be Islamized the way Pakistan has been. The country witnessed one of the most vicious forms of religious extremism in recent times when an image on Facebook was circulated during the 5-day religious festival of the minority Hindu community, showing a Quran placed on the statue of a Hindu deity. The photo, which was taken at a shrine in the southeastern city of Comilla, was seen by some social media users as evidence of an act of blasphemy against Islam. And it inspired a mob to attack the shrine and several Hindu temples nearby. Since then, mobs have torched and vandalized Hindu homes, places of worship, and statues across the country. Later, the blasphemous act was found to be the handiwork of the religious extremists. This is the landscape in Bangladesh of religious extremism. Waka.
Thank you, thank you. And now I come to my second question, and I would request panelists to be, brief, because we have one more important question before we end this topic and dialogue today. So my second question, I will begin from Priya, that how is the situation of religious minorities? Are they being protected by the government? And secondly, how government is dealing with such religious extremist groups in your respective countries? So Priya,
Waqar, can you just repeat that? There was a connection
One
problem.
thing is that how religious minorities are getting affected because of these extremist waves by the majority, and how government is protecting them, and how government is trying to deal with such extremist groups.
Okay, sure. So, such hateful propaganda and violence that we are seeing in India in recent times, it's extending to other minority groups as well, besides Muslims. So Christians, Buddhists, indigenous faith groups, and Hindu nationalist groups have been claiming, and Christians have particularly been under vicious attack, and they've been claiming that Christians are fueling Hindu conversions by luring people with cash payments, foreign trips, medical assistance. Christians only make up 2.3% of India's 1.4 billion population. It's a really tiny number, but even then the police are unwilling to prosecute religious extremists in the wake of such violence. And the United Christian Forum, a group that monitors atrocities against Christians in India, recorded 598 violent incidents against Christians in 2022 from about 21 states across India, and until March 2023, the same group reported 187 verified incidents
That's a big number with all minorities.
Violence against Christians. And so the incidents of violence, they extend into intimidation, mob violence, vandalism of sacred places of worship, sexual violence, closure of churches and other faith centers, non-Hindu faith centers, and also, false reports under anti-conversion laws.
And you see, forced conversions as well. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, under the garb of forced conversion, and particular regions in the country are especially targeted, like the central part of India, especially in the tribal dominated, say the Bastar region in central India, where it's largely inhabited by many indigenous groups from various faith leanings, and even tribal Christians, and they're always kind of put under the scanner on the allegations of religious.
And what role of governments do you see, what role of governments respective, I mean, states and federal government to tackle these issues?
So you know, the government has been kind of giving, the government has obviously lent a very strong, lent support to what's happening in
that's very unfortunate, yeah.
And you know, because of the number of attacks against Christians, especially in India, we see many public interest litigations have been filed by Christian leaders, really pleading the government to do something about the attacks and in the midst of the rising persecution of Christians and their priests and institutions. The Indian president, for instance, Draupadi Murmu, in recent times, you know, she expressed concern over reports of increasing persecution of Christians. But despite, you know, these concerns and the government stepping in and giving really, you know, it's mouthed, support is mouthed and support is kind of spoken of. But unfortunately, when you talk to the community leaders and when you talk to what's happening, people who know what's happening on the ground, these are just, you know, very superficial ways of reaching out and making, you know, it seem as though support is being doled out to minority groups who are facing attack.
So unfortunately, can we say, are we fair to understand that political will seems compromised while protecting minorities particularly?
Can you be a little louder, Waqar?
Yeah, can we, are we fair in understanding that political will seems compromised while taking action? Compromised. Political will is compromised in taking action against the extremist groups or fully protecting minorities.
Oh, yes. I mean, one can't say, you know, fully would be a very broad-based general term. But yes, I mean, there are many.
To some extent, yeah.
Yes, to a large extent. To a large extent.
Thank you, Priya. Mubashir, can you please? Yeah, thank you, Priya. And Mubashir, can you please let us know about the situation, how government is dealing with these extremist groups, or actually how government is protecting these religious minorities, like we have Hindus and Christians here. Those are religiously persecuted normally.
Yeah, interestingly, the largest non-Muslim community in Pakistan is Hindu community. And the issue of forced conversion was high in Sindh. So in Punjab, we saw some Christian forced conversions, and in Nankana Sahib, a couple of forced conversions of Sikh girls were reported. And then, as I mentioned in my answer before, that blasphemy at targeting non-Muslim communities and even Muslims through blasphemy law is another issue. And then terrorism, again, as is said by our panelists, it is an outcome of extremism. So terrorism is still on the rise. Our security forces are being targeted on everyday basis, daily basis. During the recent years, the state of Pakistan and the successive government, be it Pakistan People's Party or PMLN or PTI, took some steps to counter these evils. Like Sindh government passed a bill against forced conversions, forced marriages. Likewise, we first established counter-terrorism department, then strengthened them with the latest technology. And we can see some results of the government policies. Like I remember an incident took place in Sheikhupura a couple of years ago when a mob tried to kill a Christian couple, and the police reached the spot and they took the couple into custody for protection. And then police got registered cases against the mob leaders. And likewise today, an incident happened in Kohistan. As I told you, a Chinese was rescued. Whereas in Faisalabad today, a woman who is not mentally stable, she was rescued by police. Likewise, we saw a mob attacked a temple, Hindu temple in Rahim Yar Khan, and they broke all statues, holy statues over there. And the community, Muslim community responded to that incident very well. Now the temple has been reconstructed with the help of the government, and some artists belonging to Muslim communities, they reconstructed the statues and gifted to that temple. So the government and police and rights groups are basically making a coordinated effort to counter these evils, menace. But the level of this thing is so high in our society that we need more policies and more vigilance by the society itself. Otherwise, spillover is still underway.
But do you think political will is sometimes weak as well, or compromised as well, or not? In some cases.
In some cases, yes, political will is compromised, and in some cases, the will was little. But in total, we see successive government made very useful laws.
So we can say there is a realization.
There is a strong realization, but you know, there are some pressure groups which try to create hurdles in implementation of the laws through power tactics, or you can say threats and other underhand tactics. But I feel that will is there in the state, in the government departments, and in the society.
And how is the situation in Colombo? Like, do you think that government is tackling these religious extremist groups in a very good way? It is protecting minorities?
Waka, thank you again. Yes, in Sri Lanka, there have been a lot of issues in terms of government's involvement in tackling fundamental groups and extremists, especially, again, Easter Sunday attacks. This is the best example we can bring. We had communal disharmony, riots breaking out after the attacks as well. And there was very limited action taken, even regarding the hate speech, the disinformation, misinformation that was circulated on social media. And it's unfortunate to note that we heard about this, about a political intervention, how politicians garner support, take advantage of these situations. And in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, there is a lot of political influences because elections are around the corner, and we're going to see this again.
The is a vote bank, yeah.
Exactly. Local government elections have been delayed, but this is around the corner, and we're going to see as many members of various political parties. Mind you, they're going to use the Islam and Buddhist sentiment to pit them against each other and create that kind of disharmony. But again, there is a massive role that mainstream media can play here, as opposed to the devastating influence mainstream media played post-Easter Sunday attacks. But I will talk to you that later. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for us. So
that's very unfortunate that we see, and as we understand from Priya and Mubashir and you, that unfortunately even political actions are sometimes compromised just because they fear that there will be backlash from their vote bank. And that is why they compromise. So Mr. Uday, can you please tell us how the situation in Bangladesh, how government is tackling religious extremism there, and how they are trying to protect religious minorities there? Mr. Uday. Uday, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, in Bangladesh, the situation is quite unique. First of all, the minorities who bear the brunt of attacks by religious extremists, they account for the 10% of the population. As such, religious extremists do get overt and covert support from the majority group. The ruling Awami League, which professes secularism, has initially sought to neutralize the religious extremists. But subsequently, this is unique in Bangladesh, its crusade against these groups has turned out to be a cover for crushing its main rivals, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, and also liberals who do not spare the government for its acts of omission and commission. As a result, the government has increasingly taken the support of extremist groups and considered their demands for cornering liberal forces. Such concessions have allowed a group called Hifazat and other Islamists to influence the government's policy making despite limited public support or electoral clout. This is unique. Here, the government is taking help of extremist groups to corner opposition and crush liberal elements. This is really unfortunate, and this is typical of Bangladesh.
So this is again,
Yes,
unfortunately, we see that there's a political agenda, whether to take action or not, or how to respond to these extremist groups. So this is the situation. Last question, participants. I will come to our journalistic role here. That what role of media you see while reporting these religious extremism issues, and what challenges normally do they face? Can you please be brief and concise? And also, if you can suggest way forward, do you think that we need some sensitization of media here, or some training of media here, whether they are impartial, whether they are neutral, whether they are fairly reporting such issues, and whether they are being protected by the organizations and by the government and state as well? Can we start from Priya?
Yeah, sure, Vakar. I think it's an extremely important question. You know, as journalists, our role here in these times is to really report the truth. And despite, you know, the concerns and attempts to curtail these hateful attacks, journalists are widely being trolled, you know, attacked verbally online and even attacked physically. And these are also happening at when you are trying to report, you know, the extremism that's playing out on the ground. Say you're reporting a rally or you're reporting an event being organized by Hindu extremist leaders. So there is a threat to your own safety and security as a journalist. But you have a wider calling and a very important role to really be able to deal with these threats to report the truth, which definitely gets compromised. As we are seeing the mainstream media, there's massive crackdown on the mainstream media and among journalists who are aligned with the mainstream media. So in that sense, independent journalists are becoming far more critical in these times where you don't have the luxury and the umbrella of support that, you know, being aligned to an organization would allow you. But it also gives you the leeway and ability to really go out there and understand what's happening on the ground. So you have the avenues available to you to report the truth. And it gets even more critical when we are reporting in conflict regions like, say, Kashmir, where, you know, you could just be charged under journalists, especially there, you know, local journalists, they are charged under the Public Safety Act, anti-terrorism law. And like in Kashmir and other parts of the country as well, you know, journalists could be charged and put under surveillance or under some kind of...
and do you think this fear of high risk is also actually promoting self-censorship in media as well?
Yes, of course, you know, and that is what is happening, you know, among journalists who are aligned with the mainstream media and the, you know, media that is doling out more propaganda than actual reality on the ground. So in that sense, you are under the additional pressure of, you know, catering to the requirements of the organization. So your voice gets silenced or stifled in, you know, in the midst of so much that's happening around you. So, so your voice, I mean, the voice of the journalists in these current times is the main question here. How do you keep your voice intact? How do you make it known, be heard in these very difficult times. And I think, this calls for real introspection, because we need to, at also these times, as difficult as they may be and as challenging they may be, to especially reporting religion in these times, it also reminds us why we chose the profession in the first place.
And what do you suggest for that? How to improve?
Yeah,
this?
I mean, in these
suggestion?
times, I mean, it's important that, since I'm an independent journalist, I decided to break with the mainstream media. I can only talk about how I deal with kind of, the threats or trolling or attacks that I'm always exposed to. So you have to develop your own security kind of apparatus in a certain sense. You have to, network a lot more. You have to reach out to journalists in other parts of the world and independent journalists in India and figure out how best to
networking. So thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to listen from Mubashir.
And I just like to encourage Waqar, very quickly, even one last point.
Please.
I think, as a journalist and as a human being in these very difficult times, it is absolutely critical that we tap into our inner strengths. We tap into our inner strength so that we can move forward with courage and resilience. These are difficult times, but these are also great times to report.
Yeah. Thank you. Mubashir, can you please, what are the challenges for media, and do you think that there's need to do things better, and how we can do that?
Yeah, the first challenge is about media's own survival. One, and second, surviving in a flood of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda in the age of social media.
But if you can specify in terms of religious extremism, that what are challenges?
Yeah. So I'm telling you that these days, Pakistan's media, most of the media outlets are basically becoming mouthpieces of various political and religious forces instead of performing their duty as a free media outlet. And likewise, journalists, for example, when I joined this profession, you can say 30 years ago, my boss who was interviewing me asked about my religious, political, and social tilts. And then he told me that your political, religious, and social tilts should not be reflected in your work when you are reporting specifically. This is not happening right now. And this is the biggest challenge. That how a media person...
But is it because of some fear, or it is because of some ideological tilt?
This is because of policies. This is because of ideological tilt, because we saw during Afghan jihad back in 1979 that people belonging to a particular group like Jamaat-e-Islami who are included in the mainstream media just to promote jihad. And in the following years, we saw people belonging to various, you can say, extremist groups not only joined, but also owned media outlets.
What is the way forward in your view? What is the, can you suggest some briefly measures? What are some of the measures which media needs to take?
Media needs to take is training of their journalists, editorial control, and above all, they should have a neutral editorial policy. Recently, I basically asked heads of various news channels about the editorial policy, and it was not a shock to me, but might be for you, that 70% of our media outlets don't have any editorial policy or ethical policy.
That's very alarming figure. Thank you very much. I will cut you here, sorry. I will go to Indivari and to tell us about what are the challenges for media there and what is the way forward.
Yes.
While covering such religious extremism issues.
Sure. A few areas I'd like to highlight. I think we've heard some important points from the previous speakers as well. But in terms of reporting on cases of violence and extremism, especially attacks and explosions, we have to be very sensitive to the victims and as well as how we portray and analyze the events, because we have 24-hour news channels now. If we talk about South Asia, we're really, we love to talk about what happened, and we love our media station. We have 24-hour news. We keep talking about what happened, how we analyze it, and what brought on these difficulties.
And do you think? I think
she disconnected.
Yeah, there's some interruption from her side. Maybe we can go to Mr. Uday just to say a few lines about way forward. I will come back to you later.
All right, okay.
Okay, Mr. Uday, can you please briefly and shortly tell us what are the challenges for media in Bangladesh to see while covering such issues? And
See, certainly it is not easy to report on the extremist groups. Journalists of Bangladesh I have talked to speak of the climate of fear created by these groups through killing of liberal-minded bloggers and some journalists. The message for them is loud and clear. Refrain from writing against the groups. Small media outlets often succumb to such pressure, but the bigger ones, at least some of them, continue not to be manipulated by objectively reporting on religious issues. Now, as for the media's role, see, I have been writing on religious extremism for so many years. My modus operandi is based on the basic tenets of journalism. These are objectivity, dispassionate presentation of facts without letting my personal religious faith color my portrayal of truth, and the courage to call a spade a spade. That is most important. There are risks, but one has to take them as far as possible in order to do justice to the profession of journalism.
Thank you. Indi, can you, I just wanted to ask you, Indi, just to conclude, can you say, you were saying something?
Yes. I'll add to what I was talking about the victims, but especially when we report on extremist cases and terrorism, we have to ensure that we are balanced. What I mean by balanced is to what extent do we allow the influencing ideology and the perpetrator? What kind of space do we give? So that needs to have a lot of editorial assessment.
And do you have a strong gatekeeper role in the organizations?
In the organization I work, there's a lot of questions, but in Sri Lanka, we don't really have that, because we see a lot of biases in terms of, even privately owned channels. We'll see the owner aligned to one political party or the other, or one group or the other. So this is why the chaos was created.
So partisan and so they have their preferences.
And also the field reports that we give out, we try to have analysis from victims blaming a certain party or not, or interested parties. Political henchmen may come and give their expert knowledge, but these things should be avoided by all means. Just report facts.
And how reporters, lastly and very shortly, how reporters are sensitized while reporting on these issues?
Oh, that's another thing, because we need to keep our airtime rolling, and we need to have a lot of information coming in. So they try to talk about their analysis, and there is a lot of sensationalism and that sensitivity of your own biases brought out on TV. I'm talking mainly on broadcast. And in terms of writing too, so that damages the social fabric, the beautiful coexistence of people that we should otherwise protect, and allow these extremist groups to come in. And we might not be the solution there. We might be the reason why there is chaos. And this is why I continue to say we should focus on facts, no analysis or
preferences, partisan, deals. Thank you very much, Indi, and thank you very much, all the dear participants. I think it's very interesting discussion, and it can go on, but we have to close it because of time. And very insightful discussion and background of religious extremism from different countries in South Asia. The recording of this session will be available on the IARG Facebook as well. So thank you, viewers, as well. And I hope we'll come back in near future with a different topic. And thank you again. Bye.
Thank you, Waqar.
Bye.
Thank you.